like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right, so let's jump into this Alamo Bowl. I know you're curious what it means for both Colorado and BYU's future, especially BYU with those college football playoff dreams they're still holding on to.
Yeah, it was a fascinating matchup, no doubt about it. A People's Big 12 championship, as some have called it, with both teams having tied for first in the conference, but missing out on that official title game.
Yeah, and of course, the drama of Shedder Sanders and Travis Hunter suiting up for Colorado, even though they're both NFL bound. Talk about dedication, even if it ended in a bit of heartbreak.
Oh, you have to admire their competitive spirit, but let's be honest, BYU completely ran away with this one, 36-14, not even close.
Wow. That's a pretty emphatic statement for a team trying to make a late CFP push. So I'm curious, does a win like that actually move the needle for the committee, or were they looking for something more specific from BYU?
It definitely helps their case, especially the margin of victory. Remember, they were ranked 17th going into the bowl, considered a long shot for the playoff. But this wasn't just any win. This was a dismantling of a ranked opponent, a team that had given other top teams trouble.
Okay, so it's not just about the win, it's about the way they won.
Exactly. BYU played with a level of dominance and precision that makes you take notice. They controlled the line of scrimmage. Their defense was suffocating, and their offense was efficient. It was a complete performance.
And this is all while missing out on the Big 12 championship game, which had to sting a bit.
Absolutely. But their only 2 losses this season were by a combined 9 points, including one to the eventual Big 12 champ, Arizona State, who is in the CFP. They had a legitimate argument before, and now this just adds more fuel to the fire.
So they're saying, look, committee, we can hang with the best. We just need the chance.
Right. And their coach, Kehlani Sitake, echoed that sentiment in his post-game comments. He talked about how this team believes in itself, how they prepared meticulously, and how they never lost sight of their goals. It's clear this team has a strong sense of purpose.
I bet their fans are hoping that resonates with the committee.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about Colorado. It seems like a tough way to end what was a truly electrifying season.
It is, but you can't take away what they accomplished this year. They brought a level of excitement and energy to Colorado football that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, their offense was explosive and they had everyone talking. But those offensive line issues that plagued them throughout the season seemed to rear their ugly head again in this game.
Yeah, it was definitely a factor. You could see Shedder Sanders under duress for much of the game, and it disrupted their offensive rhythm.
He still managed to put up some decent numbers, though. 208 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions.
He did. And Travis Hunter had a big game, too, with 106 receiving yards and a touchdown. That 58-yard catch and run on the first half was a thing of beauty.
Oh, yeah. Those two were electric all season long. But now, with both of them moving on to the NFL, it feels like a new era is beginning in Boulder.
It's a major turning point for the program. They've lost their 2 biggest stars, and they have a lot of roster turnover to address. It's going to be a fascinating challenge for the coaching staff.
So they're saying goodbye to the primetime era and entering the rebuilding phase.
It certainly looks that way, but they've already taken some steps to prepare for the future.
Like what? Fill me in.
Well, they secured a commitment from Julian Lewis, a 5-star quarterback prospect for the 2025 class. He's considered a generational talent, so that's a huge get for their future.
Wow, talk about thinking ahead.
Yeah.
But what about the here and now? They need someone to step in at quarterback next season.
Right, and they've addressed that too. They dipped into the transfer portal and landed Kaidon Salter, the former Liberty quarterback. He led Liberty to a Conference USA title just this past season.
Oh, interesting. So they're bringing in a guy who's already tasted success at the college level. I'm curious, how do his skills translate to what Colorado needs?
That's a great question. Salter's a dual-threat quarterback with a strong arm and good mobility. And that mobility might be their saving grace, given the offensive line issues we just talked about.
So they're hoping he can create plays outside the pocket and avoid the pressure.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to turn a weakness into a strength. If Salter can consistently make plays on the run, that shaky offensive line becomes less of a liability. But, can he make those reads under pressure? That's the real question. And can he handle the jump in competition from Conference USA to the Big 12? That's another big question mark.
Sounds like there are a lot of ifs surrounding Salter and this Colorado team in general. What are some of the other hurdles they're facing as they enter this new chapter?
Well, beyond the obvious question at quarterback, they have a lot of holes to fill on both sides of the ball. The transfer portal giveth, and the transfer portal taketh away. A lot of the players who came in this past year are now leaving, so the roster is going to look very different.
It's almost like hitting the reset button, isn't it? They have this incredible influx of talent, but now they need to find a way to build something sustainable.
You nail it. It's a completely different challenge than what they faced this past year. They need to establish a new identity, develop new leaders, and find a way to maintain that excitement and energy even without their star players.
It's almost like they caught lightning in a bottle with Sanders and Hunter.
And now they have to figure out how to harness that energy for the long haul. It's not going to be easy.
So we have BYU riding high after their Alamo Bowl win, making a strong case for a CFP spot, and then we have Colorado entering this new era with a lot of uncertainty and a whole lot of potential.
Yeah, it really highlights the constantly shifting landscape of college football. One team is fighting for a national championship while the other is starting to rebuild.
And both of their stories are far from over. But speaking of stories, before we move on to BYU's CFP chances in more detail, I want to delve a bit deeper into this rebuilding process for Colorado. What are some of the key things they need to focus on to ensure success in this new chapter?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is recruiting. They need to continue to bring in top talent, especially at key positions like quarterback, offensive line, and defensive back.
So it's about replenishing the talent pool,
Yeah.
making sure they have the pieces in place to compete at a high level.
Exactly. And they've shown they can do that. They landed Julian Lewis, who is a game changer. But they need to find more players like him, players who can make an immediate impact.
Yeah, and it's not just about talent, right? It's about finding players who fit the culture, who buy into the program's vision.
You're absolutely right. Culture is huge, especially in college football. You need players who are committed to the team, who are willing to work hard, and who have that competitive fire.
And that leads to my next question. How do they maintain that winning culture, that sense of belief, when so much has changed? They've lost their coach, they've lost their star players. It's almost a completely different team.
That's going to be the biggest challenge. It's one thing to build a winning culture when you have established stars and a proven track record. It's another thing to do it when you're starting from scratch.
So it's about establishing a new identity, a new set of expectations.
Right. And that starts with leadership. They need players to step up and fill those leadership voids left by Sanders and Hunter.
So who are some of the guys you see stepping into those roles?
Well, on offense, I think a lot of eyes will be on Xavier Weaver, their leading receiver this past season. He's a talented player with a lot of potential. And on defense, keep an eye on linebacker Marvin Ham II. He's a hard-hitting, instinctive player who could be a force in the middle of that defense.
So we're talking about guys who not only perform on the field, but who also inspire their teammates, who set the tone for the entire program.
Exactly. And it's not just about the players. The coaching staff has a huge role to play in shaping the culture.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the coaching staff. They're essentially in the same boat as the players, right? A lot of new faces, a lot of uncertainty.
Absolutely. The offensive coordinator, Tim Brewster Jr., is in his first year calling plays at this level. And there are a lot of new assistants on both sides of the ball.
So they're learning on the fly, trying to figure things out as they go.
That's part of the challenge and also part of the excitement. It's a fresh start for everyone.
And speaking of fresh starts, let's circle back to BYU for a moment. You mentioned they're making a strong case for the college football playoff, but they're still ranked 17th. What needs to happen for them to crack the top 4?
Well, it's a long shot, but it's not impossible. Remember, the committee doesn't just look at rankings. They look at the entire body of work, strength of schedule, quality wins, and overall performance.
So they're looking for a team that's not just good, but also battle-tested and deserving of a spot on that national stage.
Right. And BYU has a compelling argument. They went undefeated through their first 9 games. Their only 2 losses were close, and one was to a CFP team. And now they have this dominant bowl win against a ranked opponent.
But they didn't even make their conference championship game. Does that hurt their chances?
It doesn't help. But remember, the Big 12 was incredibly competitive this year. They had a 3-way tie for first place, which is why they ended up in the Alamo Bowl instead of the championship game.
So they're almost being penalized for playing in a tough conference.
You could argue that, but they've done everything they can to control their own destiny. Now it's up to the committee to decide if it's enough.
And this is where it gets interesting. What if some of the higher-ranked teams lose their bowl games? Could that open the door for BYU?
Absolutely. Upsets happen all the time in bowl season, and if a couple of teams in front of BYU stumble, their chances increase dramatically.
So BYU fans are glued to their TVs right now, hoping for some chaos in the rankings.
I'm sure they are. They're on the outside looking in, but they're not giving up hope just yet.
Okay, let's bring this back to our listener who I know is invested in both of these teams. What are the key takeaways here?
Well, for BYU, it's about momentum, about proving they belong in the national conversation. For Colorado, it's about transition, about navigating this new era and finding a way to sustain success.
And it's about those overarching themes we've been talking about. Leadership, culture, resilience. These are the things that separate the good teams from the great teams, no matter the circumstances.
Well said. And for both BYU and Colorado, their journeys are far from over. We're just witnessing the beginning of new chapters.
And speaking of new chapters, let's get back to Colorado for a minute. We talked about the challenges they're facing, but I'm also curious about the potential, the upside. What are some of the things that make you optimistic about their future?
Well, what's fascinating here is that they have a clean slate. They're not burdened by expectations. They can build this thing in their own image. And they have some intriguing pieces to work with, like Salter at quarterback.
Yeah.
He's a wild card, but he has the talent to be special. And remember, they have a young, talented receiving core led by Weaver. They just need to find some consistency on the offensive line.
So if they can solidify that offensive line, they could have a pretty explosive offense.
Absolutely. And defensively, they have some playmakers, especially in the secondary. They just need to find a way to replace the production they lost at linebacker.
So it's about finding those missing pieces, those guys who can step up and fill the voids.
Right. And it's about developing a cohesive unit, a team that plays together, that trusts each other, and that fights for every inch.
It's almost like they're building a puzzle. They have some of the pieces, but they need to find the rest and figure out how they fit together.
That's a great analogy. And the beauty of it is we don't know what the final picture will look like. It's up to them to create it.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, we've talked about the potential, but what about the big picture? What's your overall outlook for Colorado next season? Do you think they can maintain the level of excitement and success they generated this year?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, it's too early to say for sure. There are so many variables at play, new quarterback, new coaches, new players. But I think it's going to come down to their ability to create their own identity, to forge a new path without relying on the star power that defined them this past year.
So it's about moving beyond the primetime era and establishing a new era that's uniquely their own.
Exactly. And that might take some time. There might be some growing pains along the way. But if they can embrace the challenge, if they can build that chemistry and that belief, they have the potential to surprise a lot of people.
It's like they're a blank canvas, full of possibilities.
I like that, a blank canvas. And now it's up to them to paint their own masterpiece.
And we get to watch it all unfold, which is the best part. So to our listener out there who has been following these teams all season, what are your predictions for Colorado next season? Can they recapture that magic, or will it be a rebuilding year? We want to hear your thoughts, so jump into the conversation online.
Yeah, this has been a fascinating deep dive, looking at two teams at very different crossroads.
BYU fighting for a shot at the national title.
And Colorado embarking on a new journey with a mix of uncertainty and excitement.
And that's what makes college football so captivating. It's a sport full of twists and turns, where anything can happen, and where new stories are written every season.
It reminds us that sometimes the most compelling chapters are the ones yet to be written.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. What are the ingredients for success in this new era of Colorado football? Is it about finding the next superstar? Or is it something more? Something about resilience, about teamwork, about creating a legacy that goes beyond individual talent. Think about that. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all